All right, so we're going to jump into human development. Again, if you have any questions, you guys know the drill. This is day 3. We're almost at the finish line. We're more than halfway done. So everybody's a pro at how we do this and how we go through the slides and all that good stuff. All right, so human development and behavior theories. We're going to do an overview of understanding human behavior and how it presents on the ASWB exam. We're going to go over some key theories, some contexts and systems like family, culture, trauma, biopsychosocial factors. You'll see how some of the stuff from yesterday bleeds in today and some stuff from today bleeds into, vice versa. By the end, you're going to be able to understand systems, cultural, and biopsychosocial frameworks as it pertains to the human development process. You'll be able to recognize signs of trauma, co-occurring disorders, and things like that, as well as, somebody that mute competent strategies on assessment, intervention. All of that stuff kind of ties in, and you'll be able to see how it plays a part in the human development process. All right, so we're going to go on with Jean Piaget, which is the stages of cognitive development. So a lot of people are very familiar with Piaget. Is anybody comfortable or just don't understand Piaget before I jump in? Like, is this something where you're like, oh, I got that down pat, I've studied it, I know the phases, and you pretty much can recognize it on the exam? Or do you kind of look at them and you know what's in the phases, but you don't really understand what it means when it pertains to the exam? So here we go. So sensory motor, 0 to 2 years old. This is pretty much, you think about when we're going over these theories, the best way to understand it and to make sure that you have a good understanding of what it looks like and how it will present is think about your own life. Think about if you're a parent, think about your children, think about, this is an opportunity. I want you to think about your life. So I know we said don't think about your job and all that stuff, but just think about a younger child. It could be a niece, a nephew, a godchild, whomever. Some place in your life or some time period in your life, you've had connections or you've interacted with a child through the ages 0 to 11. So kind of have a visual of what that looks like when we're going through these. It makes it easier to kind of put it in context. Basically, sensory motor from 0 to 2, this is where children begin to learn their senses. So they're learning, how to, they taste, the smell, the hearing, all those types of things. They also develop object permanence. So a lot of you guys that are familiar with object permanence, I love using the activity or the game peekaboo, because with peekaboo, you normally play with kids, they just get fascinated between the ages of 0 and 2. If you ever do that with a kid, they just think it's the best thing ever. There's no way they're not gonna laugh. And 1 minute they see you, 1 minute they don't, but they begin to understand that even though your face is covered, you're still there. So they begin to understand how objects can be there and not be seen at the same time, but they still exist. So that is pretty much what you see during that stage and that age of stage of development. You have the pre-operational stage. That's where you have a lot of egocentric thinking. That is when it's all about them. Mine. They're playing with toys and they're doing things, and you're like, oh my God, like share or give that to your brother or give that to your sister. They don't see that. And they also have a lot of imagination, which begins to grow. So this is where you see a lot of boys where they're playing cops and robbers. You see them playing with dinosaurs. They're playing superhero where they feel like they're Batman and Superman. And you have little girls that are throwing their tea parties. And in their tea parties, they're actually doing it with their dolls and they're having full conversations and their imagination is just running wild. That is what you typically see during this age. And this is pretty much normal. So according to Piaget, this is what you see and how somebody should be developing if they're in a good space and place. All right. And then you have concrete operational. That is the logical thought. That is conservative concepts up here. So basically between 7 and 11 years old, think about that. That is pretty much, elementary school, getting ready to head into middle school. So they can think logically, they understand certain operations like, 2 plus 2 is 4. And if I go to the store and I ask my parents, can I get something? They have to take money out and purchase it. They're beginning to think a little bit more in their thought process. So that is pretty much when you're looking at these stages, you understand how they're developing. Remember, we're talking about cognitive development when we're talking about Piaget. So this is all cognitive, it's cognition. Think about how we think in our thought process. So that's how you associate these questions when you see it. You're not looking at the other theories, but we'll get to them. This one's strictly cognitive development. So that's how you have to frame it. And then you have formal operations. This is the last stage. So according to Piaget, it's just those 4 stages. That's it. Once you get to 11, we're all in the same stage right now. This is where we're able to have abstract and hypothetical thinking. We understand like, hey, if we study really hard, we're going to pass this test. If I spend time doing this, more likely I'm going to be able to get this. If I work hours here, I'm going to get paid this. If I get this certification, I'll get this raise. Like we're able to think with the information we have abstractly and also hypothetically. So like if this happens, this happens. How this works, it helps social workers recognize the different milestones that individuals would be at based on their age. So if you have someone that's 2 or 3 and they're not doing any imagination activities or egocentric thinking, they're not at that stage yet. So that's pretty appropriate if they're 0 to 2. If you see someone that is 10 or 11 and they're not able to do any logical thought and think things through, then you might be a little concerned. That's a red flag. As a social worker, we're able to say something might not be right, or maybe cognitively wise, they're a little delayed. So these are the things why you have to understand healthy cognitive development so you can kind of compare it when you're working with your client. All right, let's move on to Erikson. Erikson had the 8 stages of development. So you got this is pretty much the psychosocial development. Before I jump into Erikson, does anybody enjoy Erikson or feel like they have a really good grasp on Erikson in comparison to Freud, Piaget, and Miller? Okay, so we have some Erikson fans in here. I think Erikson is pretty popular in comparison to a lot of them. So when you see Erikson, you have these 8 stages of development, and pretty much there's 8 stages. So a lot of people just remember, I got the T, the A, the I, the I, the I, and then I'm like, I don't know how do you have all those I's, but you got to be able to understand it. So they might have a little abbreviations to be able to remember it. For me, I always say this is on the right hand, this is on the left. So the goal is for everyone to kind of achieve what's on my left hand side. The right hand side, just for the example purposes, and you can see my hands. These are the things. This is what happens when things are done right. If you want to say something's right or wrong, this is where you want to be versus this is what can happen if certain things aren't met. So when I look at trust versus mistrust between 0 and 1, I'm thinking of a child in that age. What's going on between 0 and 1? What is happening with the child in that age group?
You're feeding them. They're trusting that you're going to feed them. They cry and their needs are being met or not met.
That means if they have to go to the restroom, same thing. If they have to go if they saw their pamper, if they need to eat, if they need attention, whatever it is, they assume that if they cry, that someone's going to come help them. Or even if they don't cry, they just assume that these needs are going to be met because they've been shown that this is what happens. Now, the reality of it is this doesn't happen for every child. There's some children between 0 and 1 and they're really neglected and they don't get that bonding or that attachment or that connection with their caregiver. So a lot of their needs aren't met and they begin to have that mistrust. So they're crying and they're not fed. Their pamper hasn't been changed. So this happens to children. So if this happens, that child in that age range begins to mistrust the caregiver and the people around them because they haven't been shown to be able to trust them. Then you go into autonomy versus shame and doubt. You have that 1 to 3 year old age. What's happening between that age? What's going on between the 1, 2, and 3?
That's the potty training.
Yep. Potty training. What else is happening?
They trying to do things by themselves.
Absolutely. That's where that autonomy comes in at. So you have this little kid that's 2 years old. He's going to the bathroom. And I remember when my kids were potty trained, if they went to the bathroom and we were like doing the potty dance and like excited and clapping and making a big fuss about it, that is showing them they're excited. They want to be autonomous. They want to get things done. They're excited that they're able to achieve these things and do these things independently and they get praised for it. But on the flip side, there's some kids that are 2 and 3 and they have a lot of difficulty when it comes to potty training. So they're soiling themselves. They're having frequent accidents. They're crying. The parents can't get them to go to the bathroom. So the parent might be reactive. No, you don't do that. They might scold them. They might, pop them on the hand, pop them on the leg. Hey, you went to the bathroom. You didn't do it. That's a no-no. Whatever it is, that child begins to have some shame behind that specific activity or the specific thing they're trying to achieve. At that point, they're like, oh my God, I'm shameful. I can't do this. They're young. They can't articulate that normally between 1 and 3 in an appropriate way, but they might just be really shy. They might not like to do certain things. You might just notice a change in their behavior and how they function. So that is the difference there. Then you have initiative versus guilt. It's actually autonomy versus shame and doubt. So most of you guys don't want the whole thing. But anyways, initiative versus guilt. So then you have that 3 to 6 years old. And pretty much during this stage, this is where children are taking initiative. Mommy, I want to wash the dishes. Mommy, I want to, clean up. And they're grabbing the broom and the mop and they're trying to do things. And you're excited. You're allowing them to take initiative to do things. Now, if they don't do those things, or if they do them and they're being scolded, like, put that down. You messed it up. You dropped that on the floor. You making a mess. Just go sit down. I don't need you to help me. They begin to feel guilty and feeling as if they can't accomplish a thing or that something's wrong with them at that stage and point in their life. Hey guys, if you tired of studying alone or second guessing every ASWB question, you need this. Go to chat.lcswvibes.com. Yes, this is the AI tutor for LCSW Vibes, your study partner that never sleeps. Ask it anything and get instant explanations. Practice real ASWB style questions. Get answers with the rationales. Build a personalized study plan and even learn the FMBM method step by step. I'm telling you, people are leveling up faster than ever. If you're tired of spending money on test prep materials and you just need one thing that's going to help get you to the finish line, this is the investment you need to make. Check it out. Talk to you soon. And then you have industry versus inferiority. So during this stage, this this is 6 to 12. This is when the individuals are pretty much looking at being industrious, contributing, doing something. They're in school, they're participating in activities, they're engaging with friends and just doing stuff, and they feel like they're contributing and doing what they're supposed to do. But if they begin to get bullied or shamed or told that they're not good enough, or they're not able to accomplish stuff, or they're not making a team, or missing all the shots, or not kicking the ball in the outfield, whatever they're doing, they begin to have some type of inferiority. They begin to feel a little bit like they're not good enough and kind of look down on themselves and their ability to do stuff. And then you have identity versus role confusion. So that's between 12 and 18. This is pretty common. This is normally those middle school, high school age. That is where we're looking at individuals that are trying to identify who they are as a person. How are they going to show up? Here they're taught, you'll see a lot of questions about sexuality, kids coming out, different things. And that is pretty much in that identity where they're trying to figure out who they are, how they're going to show up in society. And if they're treated with the confidence and they have people who are in their corner that can support them, they normally have a strong identity. But if not, they can start having confusion. Like, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to do or how I'm supposed to be, and whatever it may be, they begin to have that role confusion there. And then you have the intimacy versus isolation. That is that young adulthood. So just think about being in college. This is probably the best time. College, pretty much probably college, grad school, depending on when you went to grad school, or just like that 21 to 25, somewhere around that age group. In this age group, this is when you're learning how to have those, probably beforehand, but you're learning how to have those serious intimate relationships where you're connecting with people, you're learning to get your needs met, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in friendships, whatever it is, that's what's taking place during that stage. But if you feel like you can't connect and you're unable to have those intimate relationships and connect with people, sometimes they isolate. They say to themselves, they feel like they're not good enough and they can't connect with people. So these are how the stages are. And it's really important because on the test, it's not likely going to, sometimes it'll give you a recall question, like this is what's going on with the client, what stage of development are they likely to be in? But I always tell people, just because someone's in a certain age realm, sometimes you can get stuck or just not accomplish things in a certain stage. So it can throw you off a little bit if it's say it's a 25-year-old and they're having a hard time with their identity of who they are and coming out and all those things. They're clearly older than the identity versus role confusion, but that is the stage in Erickson that they could possibly be battling with based on the context of what it's sharing in that story. All right. And then you have genitivity versus stagnation. That's that middle adulthood. So in this middle adulthood stage, you genitivity versus stagnation. So this is pretty much where probably a majority of us are. We fall in this genitivity versus stagnation stage. And this is where we're actually contributing to society, having family, having children, in long-term relationships, marriage, all that stuff, working a good job, finding a job, able to have steady employment, whatever it is, you have that genitivity piece going for you. But there are a lot of people, you can look back and you can see people you went to high school with, college with, and so forth, that haven't really accomplished a whole lot in society terms. So I'm treading and saying that when we're looking at this, we're looking from a societal standpoint and not like a cultural thing. Because in some cultures, it's not meant, or they don't believe in certain people going to college. Like, I've had a friend and she was like, her family told her she'd never get married because she had all these degrees, and that's not acceptable in her culture. So when I say this, we're kind of looking at mainstream and how society as a whole looks at it, not necessarily one individual culture. So be mindful of that. But if that person has not accomplished a lot according to the standards of society, and maybe haven't went to school, or maybe haven't started a family, maybe haven't been in and out of jobs, and they just can't seem to maintain things, they're at that stagnation piece where they're just kind of there, kind of trying to find their way and having some struggles with actually doing that. And then the last stage is integrity versus despair. That is that late adulthood. That is that state. You see this a lot in questions, normally with older adults. So integrity versus despair, that is a late adulthood. That is pretty much where you have individuals, they pretty much at the end of life stages. Doesn't mean they're dying. It doesn't mean like it's the end of the road for them, but they are pretty much at that stage. Maybe they're retired, maybe living comfortably, doing things that they want to do, living life, enjoying all those things that they want to. All of that stuff is happening for them, and they have that integrity. They feel like, I'm good. I've contributed to society. I've done my part. I have a beautiful family. I've had an amazing career. I'm retired. I've done this. They feel really great. But then on the flip side, you see people who have that despair. They just haven't accomplished much. They're just really there. When I think about this stage, if I'm going through everyday life, I'm sure a lot of people in your areas, you have people who are like bums, which we would call them. I'm sure it's a maybe that term is gonna, hopefully it doesn't get me canceled. I know it's a new word, maybe, I don't know it, but I'm just gonna say bums are people who just don't have things, homeless people, and they're on the street and you see them. This would be a primary example of someone that's in despair, possibly because they feel like I don't have anything. I'm here and everyone else would just have to, help me contribute and do whatever, because this is just the life that I built for myself and I don't have much to show for it. That is pretty much that despair. All right. And then you have Marlowe's theory of object relations. So this one, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on. It does show up a little bit on the exam. I will tell you that the separation and individuation phase, which is 5 to 24 months, that is what's been more focused on the clinical understanding. So if you're taking the LC, then that's something you probably want to have a little bit more understanding of and practice. The normal symbiotic phase is not really discussed too much, but that differentiation stage, that's 5 to 9 months, that's where a child begins to learn to separate from their caregiver. They're basically growing awareness of their identity, who they are, who their parents are, and so forth. Practicing between 9 and 15, that's when a child begins to explore outside of the environment. Most of the time, these kids are in childcare, have another caregiver or someone else is taking care of them when their parents are not there, but their caregiver is always serving as that secure person. They know that's who's going to pick them up, or they know who that's the person that's going to connect with them. So that is the practicing. And then you have it's actually pronounced rapprochement. It's a French word, but I call it rapprochement, but clearly it's not correct. But that's what I'm gonna say, just because I've been practicing the French term for a little bit today and I still don't have it down pat. So you guys just got to deal with the way I'm saying it. The child experiences a desire for independence, but also the need for the caregiver support. So it kind of leads to that confusion phase. So think about a child that's 15 to 24 months. They know, mine, but then they're crying, want you to pick them up and do things the same time. They don't know whether they're coming or going. They want the help, they don't want the help. So that is pretty much what's taking place on a child in that stage. Hey guys, real quick, it's your girl. I wanted to stop by and show you I got my merch. Yes, everything is up in action. You guys have been asking for it, so make sure you go to the Shopify store and check it out. Right there, arizahillman.shop. Check it out. You get the nice little package in the mail right before the holidays. Look at that. Oh, baby, I'm telling you, I'm gonna be rocking this all winter long. And then the summertime come, I already got the request for the tank tops. Your girl is working on it. So make sure you stop by the Shopify store. Right at the bottom of this description, you'll see the store, and just go ahead and purchase some merch. See you soon. And then you have that object constancy. That is 24 months and up. This is where a child develops the ability to internalize the caregiver's image, support, even when they're gone. So by 2 years old, a child pretty much understands that, hey, that's my mom, that's my dad, that's my aunt, that's my grandma, whoever it is in their life. And you take them to daycare, school, wherever they're at, you leave them with a friend, a family member, a babysitter, but they understand that that's my caregiver, the person that's taking care of me, and they're going to come back, even though they're not here now. They begin to have better understanding of that. So when you're dealing with Marlowe's theory, it's critical when you're looking at those attachment issues, understanding the impact of early trauma on individuals, and just kind of looking at individuals' behaviors, how it relates to them being dependent or being having that autonomous mindset where they're able to do things independently and on their own. All right, classical condition. This is Pavlov. This is learning by association. Again, I've done videos on pretty much everything that we're going over today. So I'll explain it to the best of my ability. A lot of people struggle with classical conditioning. The best way I can explain it is learning by association. You learn by associating a behavior or thing with something else. So clearly with Pavlov, you already know you had the dog. The food was that unconditioned stimulus, and then the salivation, saliva, however you want to say it, was the unconditioned response. That was automatically, and then they associated, they started ringing the bell, and then all of a sudden the food, they associated the bell with the food, and then the dog would start salivating. So these are some terms that you're likely to see, but you're not going to see them use an example of a dog, but they might give an example on the test is going to actually show a certain behavior like anxiety, phobia, a certain type of reflex or response to a certain type of situation. A lot of times trauma related. How somebody responds, you can see like if they learned this by association. Something happened, and as a result of that, they get startled or they freak out or they have a panic attack or they get nervous. So that's why it's important to understand classical conditioning and how it operates. So it's an automatic, unconscious learning process, but it's by associating. So if you want to differentiate classical from operant, one is learning by association, one is learning by consequences. So it's kind of easier to differentiate. You have a question, how it pops up. What most people have trouble with is actually the unconditioned stimulus versus the neutral stimulus. and the conditioned stimulus. So those are the kind of things they struggle with kind of understanding the differences there. Operant condition, you have Skinner, learning by consequences. So here is voluntary behaviors are learned or changed based on the consequence that takes place. So these are pretty much simple things. You add something to increase a behavior. You give a child a sticker for using the bathroom or the toilet, and you say, oh, you did good. That's positive reinforcement. You're reinforcing them to continue to go to the bathroom, continue to do well, because you added something like that sticker or like a chart and putting things on it. You have that negative reinforcement, that's removing something unpleasant to increase a behavior. So a lot of people get confused with the positive and negative reinforcement. But with the negative reinforcement, just think about taking something that is unpleasant to increase a behavior. So silence a loud alarm by buckling a seatbelt. So there's nothing negative or wrong about it, but you're stopping the alarm from going off by just putting in the seatbelt. That's a positive thing. But it's just, I think they get thrown off with the word negative and the word positive. It's just how something's done. So with positive, you're adding something. With negative, you're taking it away. But it's still a reinforcement. It's a way of understanding and learning something, because you're learning about the consequence. All right. Punishment, you're either adding or removing something to decrease a behavior, like timeout. You have shaping, which teaches complex behaviors with a small step. So you know what shaping is. You kind of do things to shape the behavior that you're trying to see or trying to achieve. All right. Real life exam questions. It might have like token economies, point charts, behavior contracts, those type of things. That is really, really common when you're doing parenting strategies. Some quick exam reminders: positive equals add, negative equals remove, and with reinforcement increases behavior, decreases behavior, and so forth. And let's see, a tip for the exam: if the behavior is a reflex of emotion or physical response, that's classical. If the behavior is voluntary, it happens because of a consequence, it is operant conditioning. All right, social learning theory. Bandura is learning new behaviors by observing and imitating others. This one, I kind of look at monkey see, monkey do type mentality. Here you have 4 key processes: attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. Those are the 4 key processes. But when you're looking at Bandura, it is social learning. So when you have a question that is dealing with the observation of someone or imitating behaviors of someone, you know you're looking at Bandura. Observational learning occurs by watching the emotions and the outcomes of others. So they had that boo-boo doll experiment. That was the example that came up for observational learning. If you guys want to research and look at it, since y'all taking all the pictures, you can just search boo-boo doll, because I don't remember that one per se. I know some other experiments that are very similar to that, but not the boo-boo doll. I'm kind of think I know what it is, but I need to check that first because I don't want to confuse you guys. Self-efficacy, that is the belief in one's own ability to succeed at a task. So like this is pretty much somebody's behavior and whether a person will attempt to imitate a new behavior based on how well they did at the thing. That is that self-efficacy. So this is how social workers would use these things. We model healthy or pro-social behaviors in sessions so clients can see how you're supposed to act and how you're supposed to do things. We use positive reinforcement so clients successfully can imitate desired behaviors. We address negative patterns by identifying and modifying the models a client is exposed to. And then some clues here. If you see a vignette and it's talking about learning from observation, imitation, role playing, anything like that, think of Bandura. That is why I said the monkey see, monkey do. That is that modeling behavior. All right, let's talk about some developmental milestones. These are some things that are pretty easy. We can go through these slides quickly because I'm sure you guys understand the domains of physical, cognitive, emotional, and sexual, which ironically, we talked about cognitive development in great detail. We talked about sexual development in detail. Then you have the emotional one. We touched on that a little bit. And then physical. So being able to understand what's happening and what's expected during these stages is what's most important for a social worker to understand when you're working with clients. All right, guys, real quick. I'm always talking about the community, the LCSW vibes. We leveling up, and this is the sneak peek of the community. As you can see, it's on and popping. We got a lot happening. I got ethics over here, human development, or study guides that you guys asked me about on the YouTube channel. It's all right there. Test questions. You just want to level up and learn and see if you can answer those questions. I'm testing your knowledge. Let me go back to the home screen. If you want to learn more about what services I offer and what other things are there, that is where you go to the learning tabs. We leveling up, so why don't you join so you can level up too? If you have a client that's not walking in their 3, then clearly we know something's not right there. So it's important to understand that. That's kind of the abnormal development indicators. So you have a child, red flag, physical development, they're just delayed. They're not doing certain things. That's why I use the walking as an example. Cognitively, maybe they're not talking. The child's 2-3 years old. They should be using a certain amount of words, and they're not. Also, not being able to regulate their mood and having inappropriate behaviors or discomfort with their identity. Those are some sexual red flags. If a child's touching themselves inappropriately or taking their clothes off and doing weird things, and you kind of can look at that's a red flag. That's a little abnormal. Touching touching themselves or trying to touch another child their age, some of that stuff is appropriate, but when you can tell when it's extreme and something's a red flag. All right, here's a quick question. So you got a 4-year-old client, is not speaking in full sentences or interacting with his peers. Which action should the social worker take first?
Assess for hearing and medical issues.
All right. Hey, always rule out medical and developmental causes first. All right. So let's move on to sexual and spiritual development. So you have, all right, we got about 10 more minutes. Childhood curiosity. When you talk about sexual development, children are curious. It's okay for children to be curious. So you got to be able to understand when something's weird, something's normal, and so forth. That's what these slides are about. This is the normal development of humans as a whole. So everything is not going to look the way we feel it should look. All right. So childhood, they have a lot of curiosity. Adolescence, that's when they're identifying and exploring with their identity. Adulthood, the relationships and values and what you expect from the person you're with, what you want, all that type of stuff. You also start having some of that spiritual development is kind of supposed to be right under the adulthood. That's a typo, so you can look at it that way. Childhood, pretty much you beliefs mimic your caregiver. So if you're a family that goes to church all the time and you have a young child or a grandchild or someone that goes to church with you, they begin to mimic. If you stand up and you're praise and worship, they're stand up, praise and worship. You shout, they shout. So these are examples how children begin to mimic the behaviors of their caregiver in these roles. If you have an adolescent or an adult, they begin to the value and purpose of who they are and how they want to see things spirituality wise is where they start developing and trying to figure out their purpose and what their values are as it pertains to that. So you always want to look at things from a holistic view in our lens, as our big social work lens. When we're looking at it and we're taking this ASWB big exam, we want to make sure that we're looking at it the way the examiners want us to see a thing and look at it holistically when we're looking at someone's identity, their values, and how they see the world. We also have Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you guys should all be very familiar with Maslow. So I'm not going to take a long time going over it. These are the 5 levels of human motivation. So basically when you see these questions on Maslow, the tip here is that when you use Maslow, you want to decide to address the physiological needs or safety needs before you start considering all the other stuff. So if a person's basic needs aren't being met, it doesn't matter about getting to their self-esteem, love and belonging and all that kind of stuff. You got to make sure that these things are taken care of first. So the way this is set up, I have plenty of those in the course. I have the nice little colorful Maslow hierarchy of the needs chart, and it's the chart is listed the correct way because normally it's from the bottom up. So here I'm just telling you what it is. So from the bottom is 1, then it's 2, then it's 3, then it's 4, then it's 5. So the physiological needs like food, water, shelter has to be met. And that also turns into somebody's physical safety needs. Then if they have those things, you can begin to feel safe, have that emotional security, that financial support, those type of things. And it kind of elevates. All right, so here's some key takeaways for the exam. Just know the theories, be able to identify like which theory we're talking about, like the human development theories, obviously, explain specific behaviors, understand normal development, any red flags across the domains, be able to apply cultural humility framework. So that means how you approach clients, recognizing your biases, recognizing that they're the expert in their culture, think systematically. This aligns with the NASW value of importance in human relationships, as it recognizes the client's well-being is deeply tied to relationships, their families, communities, their society as a whole. And you want to use a strengths perspective, identify protective factors and resilience. And remember, the ASWB exam tests your ability to apply these concepts in basic practice scenarios, not just memorizing facts. That's the main thing. I see when people study, they just want to memorize everything. So sometimes you can just take the information. It's like reading a book. You just have to comprehend what you're reading to be able, you can understand it and apply it to different scenarios and different situations.
Hey y'all, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and watching a little bit about boot camp in action. As you can see, it's live interaction, it's games, it's activity, it's engagement, it's everything you need to level up and feel a part of your learning process. So if you have not tapped in and joined any of our boot camps thus far, go to www.arisahillman.com/bootcamp. Absolutely, you'll be able to see the newest dates, the latest dates, should I say, of when we'll be having the boot camp. So you'll know when you can tap in, register, make that payment, and you'll join the next session live. We'll be able to answer your questions. We'll be able to break down content. We'll be able to show you strategy, and we're hitting every content section. This is just a little bit on ethics, but I'm telling you guys, it gets better and better each and every month. So tap in. Look forward to seeing you there.